My parents are two different sets. One has a lot of problems, but the other two are folks I genuinely admire. Why I have two sets of parents may be a mystery to you. It has to do with a disease I had as a child. My inexplicable seizures were managed to some extent with symptomatic medication. Even with the medicine, the seizures may be brought on by stress and exhaustion. Consequently, my parents prohibited me from participating in strenuous activities. My parents told me to avoid physical education classes and restricted my outside playtime with friends, even though the doctor stated I could live a normal life. Hannah, my younger sister, on the other hand, was completely different from me. She was strong, active, and a great athlete. She was generally praised for her beauty and inherited all of our parents' positive qualities. Hannah had a special enthusiasm for volleyball. Her potential grew when she joined a club squad, and she soon established herself as a regular standout player. Because of her talent level, she even practiced with more experienced players. I was both proud and jealous of her. However, I backed her. At that point, the disparities in our parents' treatment of us were apparent. Firstly, the food was completely different. Hannah received luxurious athlete meals, carefully balanced for nutrition, whereas I only got white bread and instant soup. Sometimes, I received leftovers from her meals. The difference in clothing was stark. Hannah wore popular sports brands from head to toe, while I received plain and unfashionable clothes, likely secondhand. I was neglected at events like birthdays, Christmas, or promotions, where Hannah was the center of attention. This discriminatory treatment became a daily reality for me. My innocent sister would cheerfully invite me to play volleyball with her. She simply wanted to share her love for the sport. "I can't play sports," I said. "Sorry, then how about just passing the ball to me?" I thought that might be okay, but our parents wouldn't allow it, especially my mother, who would sternly yell, "You never know when you might have a seizure, so just stay quiet." She treated Hannah gently, pampering her with kind words. Later, when I was alone, I would cry from the loneliness and sadness that gripped my heart. A significant event occurred in the spring when I was in the first year of middle school, and Hannah was in the 3rd grade of elementary school. That day, Hannah went to a match at a different school. I had a fever that morning. Despite knowing my condition could lead to seizures, both parents went to accompany Hannah. The discomfort of my illness, combined with the feeling of being left behind, triggered a severe seizure around noon. Realizing the severity, I called an ambulance without hesitation. My next memory was waking up in a hospital bed. A nurse, changing my IV, smiled kindly upon seeing my eyes open. "Do you realize you're in a hospital?" she asked. I nodded slightly, nervously looking around. There was no sign of my family in the hospital room. Has my family come?" I asked. "Your family will be here tomorrow morning. You're staying alone tonight," the nurse replied. Her response clarified the situation. My parents and Hannah hadn't returned from the volleyball trip yet. Despite being rushed to the hospital by ambulance, no one seemed worried about me. I felt as if I wasn't a family member, but an insignificant existence. Following this incident, my parents faced criticism from neighbors and started leaving me with my uncle when they went out. My uncle worked for a video game company. He and his wife, who had no children, always welcomed me warmly, as if they enjoyed having a child around. They introduced me to new games and recommended their favorites. Especially memorable was a game my uncle helped develop. It was incredibly fun. They also prepared the same meals for me as they did for themselves, and the time spent around the dining table was very warm. It's a good experience for us to buy children's clothes, they said while shopping together. Having someone who treated me with such care made me look forward to visiting my uncle's house. On Christmas Eve, at the end of my first semester in middle school, my father drove me to my uncle's house. The car was loaded with a large amount of luggage, suggesting I would spend the winter break there. Upon arriving and unloading the luggage, my father, unusually, entered the house. He seemed in a good mood, while my uncle looked somewhat troubled. The atmosphere was different, and I had a bad feeling about it. However, as I was not in a position to easily talk with my father, I could not voice my concerns and simply observed the situation. After a while, my father said cheerfully, "From today, this is your home." What? I was shocked. There was a strangely excited tone in my father's voice. "I've decided to leave you in your uncle's care. Hannah is important to us. Frankly speaking, you, with your illness, are a hassle. So from today on, this is your home, and your uncle and his wife will take care of you." At my father's cold words, my uncle raised his voice. "What kind of way is that to speak? I'm just stating the facts. There's no point in hiding it now. I'll leave the rest to you." With that, my father turned his back, said nothing more to me, and left. My uncle, clearly angry, looked at me standing dazed and spoke gently. "Were you not told anything?" I shook my head and answered, "I heard nothing. What's going on?" My uncle guided me to the living room sofa and had me sit down. Slowly, with a troubled look, he said, "Actually, this happened a little while ago during a distant relative's memorial service. At that time, your father told me, we're sending Hannah on a volleyball study abroad program for a year. To fund it, we're stopping the treatment for our eldest daughter." My uncle was furious and said, "That's incredibly unfair." But my parents did not listen to him. They were only thinking about Hannah's volleyball study abroad program. No matter how much my uncle and his wife tried to persuade them, it did not reach my parents. So my uncle said, "If you're going to stop the treatment, then I will take the eldest daughter without hesitation." My parents accepted his proposal right there. My father said, "You also wanted to move out." So I accepted it. "But seeing you now, it seems you were not informed." "It's still not too late," my uncle advised. "You should talk properly with your parents and come to a firm conclusion." I realized that I had been abandoned by my parents. It was a shock. Is it still not too late? I wondered. Maybe we could talk. But I felt it was too late to repair the relationship with my parents. I no longer felt a familial connection with them. "If you really will accept me, I want to stay here," I said. "Here, Uncle, I won't be a burden. I'll help with housework. Please, let me stay here." I stood up and pleaded. If I were kicked out, I'd have nowhere to go. "I want to stay here," I repeated. I was so worried about how my uncle and his wife would react that I lost all sense of time. Then my uncle gently stroked my head. "Would you become our daughter?" I looked up to see my uncle smiling gently at me. Yes. Thus, I was welcomed as a child of my uncle and his wife. Later, we completed a special adoption process, and I officially became their child. Living with my uncle and his wife, I was cherished and began to regain my spirits day by day. My uncle encouraged me, "Try whatever you want to pursue." Thanks to him, I could participate in physical education classes and play with friends. My illness gradually improved. I truly felt fortunate to have become the child of my uncle and his wife. During that time, I started to take an interest in esports. Thanks to my uncle's job, I encountered many video games and became increasingly engrossed. Although playing games made me tired, and fatigue brought the anxiety of seizures, my uncle and his wife never forced me. They only said, "Play within limits and manage your time," allowing me freedom otherwise. I grew increasingly determined to repay my uncle and his wife someday. In high school, I joined the esports club. The club was one of the top in the country. While competing with my peers, I enjoyed seeing myself grow stronger. I felt joy in being able to excel. In my second year of high school, I won a major competition against a strong school. That day, I was so happy I ran home excitedly to tell my uncle and his wife. The seizures had also stopped by then. Before graduating from high school, a doctor told me my illness was completely cured, and I had become as healthy as Hannah. After graduating from high school, I began my career as a professional esports player. My uncle and aunt always supported and celebrated my achievements. By the time I was over 20, I started to achieve consistent good results. Now, at 22, I am recognized as the top player. It's almost been 10 years since I was taken in by my uncle and his wife. I've been thinking about expressing my gratitude in a big way. As Christmas was approaching, I was contemplating something memorable as I headed home when I noticed unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. "I'm home. Is someone here?" As I entered the living room, I saw a girl about high school age sitting there. My uncle and aunt were sitting across from her at the dining table. "Welcome back," they said. "Who is this?" I blurted out. The girl looked somewhat familiar. Could it be Hannah? Megan. Though I didn't recognize her immediately, the remnants of her childhood face were there. When I called her name, my sister twisted her face and began to cry. "Megan, you remembered me. I'm so happy." "What's going on?" It had been so long that I wasn't sure how to react. "Hannah has left home," my uncle said. "What?" I was shocked by his words. "She ran away from home." "Megan, help me," my sister said, her voice trembling. She began to share the tough times she had endured at home. She explained how our father's decision to separate us had been a huge shock to her. Even as a third grader, she had pleaded desperately with our parents to bring me back home, even saying she'd quit volleyball. However, our father had harshly scolded her, saying, "I'm doing this for you. Pull yourself together." Our mother only added, "You're my only child. I'll support you, so aim to be a great volleyball player." Ignoring her feelings, our parents thoroughly controlled her life, forcing her into a volleyball-centered lifestyle from childhood until now, her senior year in high school. Then, during a discussion about her future, she courageously said she wanted to quit volleyball. As a result, our parents flew into a rage, shouting, "Do you know how much money we've spent on you? It's sad for your sister who sacrificed herself for you. We won't forgive you unless you become a professional." My sister was mentally cornered, and after much deliberation, she came to our uncle's house. I was at a loss for words. While I was freely living with my uncle and aunt, she had been sacrificed by our parents. "It must have been hard," I said, my voice trembling. "Megan, I've made you suffer so much, and yet I'm asking for help. I'm really sorry." My sister slumped her shoulders and shrank into herself. "Don't worry about it. I'm really happy you came," I said firmly. My uncle and aunt nodded with a smile. It was clear my sister had done the right thing by fleeing. The wrong ones were our parents. "It's okay. I'll help you." To be honest, I still felt scared. Scared of our parents. I really didn't want to deal with them, but I wanted to help my sister somehow. A plan for Christmas. After some thought, I came up with a plan. I decided to execute it on Christmas Day. Dressed in a suit, I visited our parents' home for the first time in 10 years. When I pressed the doorbell, the door swung open vigorously. "Welcome back," finally came, "huh?" My parents welcomed me with an oddly unnatural smile. They had been informed by my uncle that I was coming, so they must have known the discussion would involve Hannah. Still, I was surprised by their overly friendly attitude. "Welcome back. You finally came. What are these people who abandoned me even saying?" I thought. "It's cold, isn't it? Come inside," my father said. "No, I'm fine here. I'm busy and not planning to stay long," I replied. Their expressions briefly darkened, but they quickly remade their smiles. "So you're a pro in esports, huh? Dad is proud. And Mom too. You've won lots of prize money, right? I've been bragging about you in the neighborhood. Come back home," they said. I was annoyed by their attitude and retorted, "Why? Because a family should be together, shouldn't they?" My father said, as if nothing had ever happened. I was dumbfounded. "After you abandoned me, what are you even saying now? I've prepared a room for you. Aren't you happy? We're also setting up a good internet environment for your work. Leave it to Dad." They kept adding comments, trying to engage me. But it was clear they weren't speaking to me. They were addressing the neighbors, putting on a show, just as they had done when they sent Hannah on her volleyball study abroad program. It was all for appearances. "That won't mean anything," I said. "What do you mean?" "I'm planning to retire soon." Their faces stiffened instantly. Being a professional player requires reflexes, concentration, and physical strength. I can't keep up with the younger players, so I'm thinking of retiring before I start losing sponsors, I explained. My parents visibly panicked. "So what will you do after you retire?" "Unemployed, I guess." The smiles disappeared from their faces, replaced by anger. "Don't be ridiculous. Being unemployed is too embarrassing. What am I supposed to tell people at work? It probably won't reflect well on you. Just give up on me. I never intended to come back to this house anyway. Don't joke around. Who do you think you're talking to?" my father shouted. His voice echoed through the quiet neighborhood. My mother, concerned about the neighbor's eyes, hastily looked around. "Anyway," I said, keeping my composure, "I came here today to talk about Hannah. She's doing well at my uncle's place." "That's awful. You took her away by force." "Give her back." My mother suddenly played the victim. I glared at her coldly and declared, "I'm not giving Hannah back. I will take care of her responsibly." "What are you saying?" "I'll call the police right now." I responded calmly. "I've already spoken to the police and contacted child services. I've consulted with a lawyer too. You are the offenders." "What are you talking about?" To take care of my sister, I had consulted every authority possible. I was worried about being accused of kidnapping or other legal complications. But Hannah was 18, legally an adult. As such, she had the right to decide where to live and what to do. Hannah herself had said, "I couldn't stand the pressure from our parents anymore and left home of my own will to live with my sister." Therefore, there were no legal issues. "We no longer need to live as tools for you," I said. "Neither I nor Hannah can be happy here." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw neighbors peeking out, drawn by the commotion. Now was the time to make a scene. "You stopped my treatment just to send Hannah on a volleyball study abroad program. That's unbelievable. If my uncle and his wife hadn't taken me in, I might not be alive today. I shouted with all my might. What are you talking about? Hannah was forced to play volleyball too. Her childhood was sacrificed for your vanity. Shut up. Ignoring what my parents said, I continued. What kind of parents threaten their child to become a professional player or else? Children are not your tools. Neither Hannah nor I will come back here. If you interfere, I'm ready to call the police and go to court. I just came to tell you that. After shouting, I glared at my parents. They twisted their faces and glared back at me. People from the neighborhood watched our intense exchange from a distance. I will never come to this house again, I said firmly. I left the house with my head held high. 8 years later, I retired at the age of 30. Originally, I had planned to retire around 25, but supporting Hannah became a priority, and my own matters became secondary. Hannah had dreamed of becoming a physical therapist. She attended a preparatory school for a year and then passed the entrance exams for a professional school. Though she was hesitant, I decided to cover her tuition. I hadn't realized how much she was forced to continue playing volleyball under our parents. Out of a sense of making amends, I offered my support. After graduating, Hannah obtained her qualification as a physical therapist. She now works supporting injured athletes and is motivated to repay her sister someday. As for those parents, the scandal with me spread quickly through the neighborhood 8 years ago, and they've been living uncomfortably ever since. While they were once praised as dedicated parents supporting their younger daughter's volleyball, the truth of their behavior had been exposed. Their unreasonableness became well known. The truth had been questioned at my sister's high school and at local gossip gatherings. The terrible actions my parents took when I was taken away by an ambulance were being talked about again. It seems they were badmouthed everywhere, every day. The mask my father wore had slipped, revealing his true nature. Constantly in a bad mood due to stress, he blamed everything on my mother and yelled at her. I heard from the neighbors that they were now essentially living separately. The reason I know so much detail is that my mother has been defending herself to those around her, claiming she was not wrong. She said she did everything for her children and that she was the victim, yet they haven't divorced. Perhaps their pride, which lives for appearances, won't allow it. Their relationship has cooled completely, and they may continue blaming each other until death. What a lonely life. Thanks to my unexpectedly long career as a professional, I managed to save a considerable amount of money. With that money, I bought an apartment for my uncle and aunt as a way to show my gratitude. Initially, my uncle and his wife were hesitant, but after much persuasion from my sister and me, they finally accepted it. Seeing them exchange smiles in their new apartment, I truly felt happy to have been raised as their child. Later, I started living a relaxed, slow life in Miami. I wanted to spend some time in a warm place, enjoying peaceful days. While it may seem there is a strong bond between parents and children, desires can cause irreconcilable hatred due to even small differences. Looking at the blue sea and sky, I felt the depth of life. 3 years later, motivated by a desire to experience working like my uncle, I took a job at a general company. I ended up working at a local IT company, utilizing my skills as a programmer and getting along well with my colleagues. One day, while watching TV with a colleague, they pointed to the screen and asked, "Isn't that your sister?" There was my sister, being interviewed as a physical therapist who was handling the rehabilitation of an injured volleyball player. Being able to understand the player's feelings allows me to support them better, she said proudly during the interview. Seeing my sister liberated from being forced to continue volleyball and thriving in the path she chose filled me with joy. My uncle and aunt are enjoying their peaceful retirement in their new home. On weekends, my sister and I are invited for meals, spending time like a real family. Lately, my uncle has been sharing more memories from his days in game development. I'm really glad I took you in. I feel the same. If it weren't for you, I don't think I could have experienced this happiness. As for my biological parents, I occasionally hear rumors about them. My father has taken early retirement, and the cold relationship with my mother continues, each leading a lonely life in old age. Recently, my sister told me she was getting married. Her partner is a nurse she met at the hospital, drawn to his kindness. She mentioned that my uncle and aunt would be the guests of honor at the wedding. Those people, I don't plan on inviting them. They have no part in my new life, my sister said firmly. Preparations for the wedding were progressing smoothly. It's been more than 10 years since I left home, and I've been reflecting on what family really means. Blood relation may be important, but what's more crucial is mutual care and support, as my uncle and aunt taught me. On the wedding day, my sister and her fiancé exchanged vows with beaming smiles. The venue was filled with my uncle and aunt's friends, creating a warm atmosphere like a large family. Megan, thank you so much. I'm truly grateful to my uncle and aunt too, my sister said. Hearing her words, I quietly smiled. Whether or not you're related by blood, a true family is something you build yourself. And I felt that deeply in that moment.